Well, welcome everybody to our first lecture. As you have hopefully have a chance to review the course Canvas shell and the expectations, specifically kind of diving into to this first week, you're going to notice that this class is asynchronous, meaning that there is not a set time or place where we will have lectures. Um, and that's beneficial for especially for those that may have extreme time constraints because you're working or you've got just a heavy load, whatever the case may be, you can do this class on your own. That being said, this is going to be not a throwaway class. We actually will cover quite a bit of material each week, and this is an 8-week class, which is maybe a little bit different than what you're used to seeing in your traditional undergrad courses. This is an 8-week compressed class, and we are going to cover a lot of topics that relate to personal finance. Now, they're going to be covered in a way, though, that is merely an introduction. We're not going to go extremely deep into any main topics. But what this, I hope, will allow you to do is to see how the classes are going to provide you that introduction of material. And so you can start to see, wow, these are areas that I really have a passion for. And so I'd love to learn more. And great, maybe down the road, you can take a couple of classes here at K-State that will allow you the opportunity to do that. And you may find that there are certain areas of personal finance that you're not comfortable with, you completely don't understand it. And so, therefore, you might really start to lean into understanding why professional advice is so important because there are so many things to consider. So, in this lecture, we're going to be going through the introduction to personal financial planning and a little bit about the industry. Now, I will tell you, you have access to these slides. I did use some uh, image creators. So some of the images are mediocre at best. The content should be pretty sound though. And you have access to these in a PDF form. So feel free to download them and review them as I'm going. I want to let you know as we move through this course, through these next 8 weeks, I am not going to be reading everything on the slides. And there are some slides that I may just say, hey, you need to make sure you're familiar with that information, and I'm going to be moving on. My goal is try to make these videos, you know, probably 15 to 20 minutes. I do not want to go much longer than that. Although if I was to really take a deep dive into each one of these slides, as you notice, there's quite a few slides. It would take, probably over an hour. I don't want to do that. I really just kind of want to highlight some of the main aspects of what's on the slides, specifically for you as you're thinking about what is this idea of what personal finance really is. So let's go ahead and jump in. I will let you know I am looking at my iPad down, so as my eyes go down, I do use an Apple Pencil. So hopefully everyone sees that I will be writing on this. It's red. I don't know if I want to or have the ability to change the color at the moment, but we'll just plan on using red for right now. Okay, so just a couple of definitions as we think about this idea of personal finance. It's basically just how do you manage the money coming in as well as the money going out? Okay, that's pretty much all it is. And plan is not just what you're doing now, but what are you hoping to do and are planning to do in the future, right? So there are action items that have not yet been made. In other words, money being saved hasn't been done yet. Money being spent hasn't done yet. We put those expectations into a document, and we call that a personal finance plan. And the whole premise of the financial plan is really around trying to achieve a goal. Many of you have probably taken, I'm sure, at some point, a intro to business, or you're at least very familiar with a business plan. And that's the idea that what do I want the business to do? What am I trying to reach? What are those goals? The same thing here with the personal financial plan is where am I trying to reach? What are those goals that I'm trying to get to? Okay. And we need to make sure that we understand that there are going to be trade-offs in every one of those decisions that we make. And the trade-off, the thing that we're giving up is referred to as our opportunity cost. Okay. Okay. So how do you benefit from an understanding of personal finance? One, it's going to help you make better personal financial decisions. When you understand all of the components that go into the decisions that you're making, you're hopefully going to make better decisions. Now, that may or may not always lead to the right outcomes because we can't always control an outcome, but we can at least make the best decision with the information that we have. Additionally, this class will hopefully help prepare you so that when you do sit in front of someone that is providing you advice, whether that is a professional advisor, whether that's a parent, a family friend, whatever it may be, you at least can start to think about, yeah, maybe that's not really what I'm thinking, or I don't really feel like that's true or accurate. So you can start to assess what they're providing you in terms of information. The other piece of all of this is you may find that you love the idea of being a personal financial advisor or planner or helping others with this idea of money management. Okay, so what are some things that financial advisors and or individuals who are really working on a financial plan, what do they must consider? Okay, well, the first thing that we always need to consider is this idea of budgeting. Budgeting is nothing more than allocating money to specific categories. Okay, that should be pretty straightforward. Okay, we also have tax planning. Now, for some that are starting out, who have a lower level of assets, and who don't necessarily make a significant amount of income, wages, tax planning may not necessarily be high on the priority list. As your asset base grows, as your income grows, tax planning becomes far more important. Okay, but as you're starting out, typically tax planning might be low on the priority list. Okay, so budgeting would be a greater emphasis, maybe investment decisions, asset allocation would be maybe a bigger focus, but tax planning may not be as important early in your career and early with assets. Okay, all right, and then next is how do we start to plan out what we're going to use in our goals and or use our money for? So that's this idea of large purchases as well as managing our liquidity. Do we have enough money set aside in an emergency fund? For example, what happens if my apartment catches fire, or if I need to replace my car, or maybe I need to um, I get hurt and I need to have some money for doctor's bills. Okay, so we want to make sure we're managing appropriately the amount of money to pay those type of expenses off. From there, we want to make sure we have some form of investment strategy as well as asset and income protection. Now, this is insurance, and this is going to be our savings and our growth. Okay, insurance, i.e., protection. Okay. All right. So we want to make sure that we have a investment strategy. When we do have assets, when we have income, when we have money set aside, we need that to be able to work for us. So we want that to grow. We're going to put those into different investment vehicles that are going to help us accomplish that objective. However, we also need to make sure that we're planning the protection because we can't guarantee that we are going to have access to tomorrow. So we need to make sure that we are preparing for protecting those assets and the income that we have. Because remember, when you are young, you are working at a job, hopefully, and your significant amount of capital is human capital. It's the skills that you bring to an employer. And you need to be able to protect that. And typically we do that through life insurance. Okay. And then all of that ultimately boils down to kind of the main goals of retirement and estate planning. Okay. So this is typically income when we are not working or not employed. And then this is the distribution of our assets and how we plan to do that. Obviously, we're working our entire life to accumulate assets, and then there comes a point when we have to start to distribute those assets to beneficiaries, assuming we obviously have more than we need for our livelihood. Okay, so how do we go about first developing a financial plan? Well, first is we have to establish goals, and we need to establish those goals in kind of categories or time periods, right? So we may have a goal that's 10 years out, right? That may be starting a business. It may be putting money down on a home. We may have something that's more intermediary, like I want to buy a car when as soon as I graduate in 2 years. And then we may have something that is, oh, I would like to go on vacation during spring break that comes up in 4 months. Okay. So we need to make sure that we have these goals broken down by time periods. Now, one thing that we also need to do, and this is kind of something that is down here. So we have the timing of the goals is very important, but we also need to prioritize those goals. And this is a misstep, I think, in many aspects of financial planning is that I might have 4 short-term goals, but which one is going to take priority number one when I have money that's competing against each one of those goals? If I have $15 to set aside each week for my goals, do I do all 15 for priority one, or do I break that $15 up into $3 a piece or $4 a piece, and I just divide them up equally? Well, it depends on what the priority of my goals are for each one of those categories. So you need to break them down by time period when we expect them to be accomplished, but then we need to determine they have to have a priority. And we can't always have simultaneous priorities, because when money comes in, it's going to have to be allocated in some way. You can't allocate a dollar to the same purpose. Okay. Most very critical is this word right here. Write down your goals. It is so important when you actually put something down on paper. And when I say write, obviously you could type it out and print it out, whatever, but have it tangible, where you can see it, on your computer screen, or it's in a binder or a journal or a notebook. But have it there written down, because when we write things down, it kind of creates a solidified goal in our life. And sometimes those goals that are solidified are easier to accomplish than something that we just have boiling in our mind. Okay. Hopefully, all of you have at some point recognized this idea of smart goals. Smart goals. These need to be something that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and have some time frame or some boundedness around when it's going to be accomplished. If you don't have these, then they're kind of more just aspirations. And aspirations are great to have, but those don't boil down into specific goals. Okay. Okay. How your future financial position is tied to your career choice. We'll look at this a little bit more briefly later, but career choice is going to be very important. Medical doctors obviously have an opportunity to make far more income than perhaps someone who is going to be a trash collector. The cognition it takes to be a trash collector is not as high as the cognitive aptitude that it would take to perform surgery on somebody. Okay. So their ability to charge for their services is going to be much higher than someone who is more of just a day laborer. Okay. So your education that you're receiving is going to hopefully put you in a position that is going to be requiring you a cognitive skill set that is you're going to receive a higher compensation. And the more money that you make, obviously, the more you can do with that money. Okay. So in thinking about that, you want to consider where you currently are in your educational pursuits and what are the different opportunities within your current career. How much education do you need to fulfill that? What are the skills and interests are other people looking at in that specific discipline? And what are the earning potential do you have when it comes to that specific career? And you need to keep all of these things in mind. I'm hoping that you know that as you are entering college and as you're pursuing your college degree, there are certain degrees that unfortunately do not hold the same value in the marketplace as unfortunately we would like. And so, especially if you're financing your college with student loans, that may become very challenging to be able to pay off if the marketplace doesn't value the education that you have paid for. Okay. So you got to remember that there's a marketplace value, and you want to make sure that that marketplace is going to be able to bring you on and pay you what you're worth for that education that you just purchased. Okay. Now, this kind of leads into this idea of an economic life cycle. So as we move through life, we start to, and it kind of looks, something like, we'll call it something like this. Um, so, and it doesn't always have to look like this, but this might be when you're a teen. Okay. And as you're a teen, you don't have any expenses, but yet you receive birthday money. You might even start working. So you have this kind of baseline level of assets. And as you get to college, you stop working or potentially stop working, and you go down and you actually start to accumulate debt. So your net worth starts to decline. And then as you graduate here, so this is maybe a graduation point, you start to generate more income because now you're starting to work, and then it starts to really kick off, and then you start to reach your peak earning years. So this is about we'll say between the ages of 50 and 60, and then you slowly start to retire, and then your net worth starts to decline. So there's this idea that over time, over your life, you go through these periods of economic stages, and those stages have various characteristics. Okay, so college students typically are very traditionally, right? They're low income because many of them are not working. They're going to school, and they don't typically have a lot of assets, but they have a lot of free time and they have a ton of human capital. Okay, so these are just things that we need to be considering as you're thinking about where you are in the economic life cycle. Okay, so once you have written down your goals, okay, and you kind of have an idea of where you are, we want to make sure that we can evaluate not just one specific plan. And the reason is because there's going to be things that are going to happen, and we want to make sure we create flexibility within the plan. And maybe that's a better way of putting this: is don't create 3 or 4 different plans, but make sure you create flexibility within the plan. Okay, because things are going to happen, right? There may be a life change. There may be a situation where you have to go and you go into the military for a couple of years, and so therefore that puts you maybe ahead of schedule. Not everything has to be something that causes you to be behind schedule. Okay, you might want to establish a conservative plan, both with an investment perspective being conservative, as well as income and goals. Might be okay. Like, well, if this path was to come true, um, that is a conservative plan. But maybe on the other side, you have that aggressive plan. So, I'm going to save everything, and so I'm going to have a nest egg already, ready to go by say my mid 30s, and that changes how you pursue life choices. Okay, and then obviously step 4, very critical, is we want to go ahead and implement the plan that we believe to be the best course of action. Now, it's important to understand this idea. Plan really should become this word planning. Ing. It is a process. It is not something that is going to stop. So even though you say, okay, this is the path that we're going to be moving, we are not going to just automatically stop the planning. Planning needs to continue because planning is constantly evaluating where you are, how far you've come, and adjusting the goals as you progress toward them. We don't necessarily always have one specific way. So if you were going to travel from Manhattan, Kansas to Manhattan, New York, as you generally plan out that route, as you get to, let's say, Missouri, you may need to reroute based on construction, based on road closures, based on a flat tire in your car, based on all kinds of things. And so it's a matter of not just, this is the exact route that I need to take. You have to make adjustments, okay? And that is very important. Okay, as we are talking about this idea of financial planning, it is very important that we understand that it's not merely about assets. Assets are one component of your financial plan, but cash flow is the king. We need to make sure that we understand, as both individuals making our own decisions and helping others potentially, is that this idea of cash flow. Cash flow is the income that you are receiving and understanding the expenses that you are paying. So this is an outflow and this is an inflow. We want to make sure that the cash flows are adequate, meaning, do we have enough money coming in to pay for the money going out? And sometimes the assets that we have um, are sufficient to provide that. Sometimes they're not. Okay, so when we think about retirement, what is the ultimate thing that your parents and maybe your grandparents are thinking about is, do I have enough monthly income or quarterly income, whatever a period of time they're looking at? Do I have the income that is going to help me make sure that all of my bills are paid and that I can spend where I need to spend? That is about cash flow. It's not just about how much I have in the bank. Okay, it's about cash flow. Okay, as I previously mentioned, on the route from Manhattan, Kansas to Manhattan, New York, we want to make sure that we're evaluating how far we've come. Let's say you map that trip out, and it's going to take you, let's say, 14 hours of on the road, and you look up and you're like, you know what, we are more than halfway, but that only took us, say 5 hours. Maybe you didn't have to go to the bathroom as much, and maybe you didn't stop, and you were able to maybe boost the speed a little bit by 8 or 9 miles an hour, low traffic, and you got further along than you needed to. You can evaluate: can we stop maybe for a longer lunch? Maybe we should stay overnight and enjoy this town or whatever it may be. But we need to make sure we're doing an evaluation, that we're not just, again, that we're not just stopping because it's a process, and that's what we need to make sure we understand, that this whole uh, idea is a process. Keep that in your mind. So step 5, we want to evaluate the financial plan. And the next is if we do find that there needs to be a tweak, we actually will make that change. Okay. Maybe our asset allocation is too aggressive. Maybe we need more income now. Maybe we've aged and our priorities have changed. Maybe we no longer need that college funding because our kids are got a scholarship. And so we can move those assets into other assets with a different purpose. And then finally is this idea that we're just going to continually to monitor what is going on in our life. And that's a lot of times what financial advisors are doing. If you're in a role or if you desire to get into this industry as a financial planner, part of what you're doing is just helping clients monitor where they're going. Because when you're in the car, you can't always see the big picture. Um, Sometimes you want to be able to see that from the perspective of the GPS, right? You want to be able to see the car traveling down the road and be able to say, ooh, you know what? We're still on the right path. Great job. Or, you know what? I'm starting to see the yellow and the red up ahead on my GPS. I need to start making some adjustments. Okay. I'm not going to read all of the different aspects on these slides, but basically just going to hit on each one of these. So what are things that are going to impact your ability to reach your goals and objectives? Well, the first obviously is going to be your family structure. And we're not talking about your parents and your siblings. Typically, this is going to be your immediate family. So if you're married, or if you have a significant other, if you happen to have any children or other dependents, all of those are going to impact your family. Taking a step back, as if you've had a chance to watch my introduction, you'll notice that I have 7 children. That has drastically impacted our ability to reach some of our financial goals. 7 children, one with life-threatening food allergies, which we've required us a lot of medical attention at the very beginning of her life. But also, all of our food is specialty food. Food is expensive, especially when I'm having to buy it for seven children and 9 total. So my food bill is extremely expensive. Well, all the money going to food is not something that I can allocate towards something else. If my wife and I only had 2 children, maybe that didn't have the food allergy complications. One, my oldest daughter is 18. She's already pretty much out of the house. And then my son is 16. So in 2 years, he'll be done. We theoretically would have been empty nesters. So our life would have changed drastically from a financial planning perspective. But I still have now, in reality, I still have now 5 more children that are going to be coming up underneath my son that are needing to be taken care of. So family will play a huge factor. Your health. Again, I mentioned my daughter. So there's been a lot of health issues, doctor's appointments, specialty foods that we've had to deal with. But you may be dealing with diabetes, or you may have cancer or stroke or Other ailments, COVID, I think may have been maybe the next thing that people are dealing with the long-term effects of, with various COVID shots, or even just having COVID and the implications of that. Those issues can impact your ability to reach your financial objectives. So you just need to make sure that you're aware of these things. Your career choice. As you know, we talked about this again briefly in this lecture. Your career choice, what you're going to be doing to provide an income stream, right? Because you are basically exchanging your time and or your skill set, your human capital for financial capital. And as you do that, where your value lies is going to impact how much you're able to save and spend. Um, Now, don't get me wrong. There have been people who have retired from Walmart who have worked as a checkout person at Walmart who retire millionaires, and it's because they've been able to put a lot of money aside, or they bought in a lot of Walmart stock, whatever it may be, and they've been able to do that. But keep in mind that they've made years and years and years and years and years of decisions that have allowed them to do that. Okay, so career choice will impact your age. When you begin starting this planning process will drastically influence the outcome. Starting is a lot different than starting at 35, right? 15 years of compounding can play a significant role in being able to reach your goals and objectives. So just make sure that you understand that, because right now you are in a great opportunity to start early. And I would employ you to think about really starting to think this idea of how do I set myself up for success um, in the future and the best opportunity for success. Okay, so we've talked obviously about your family structure, your career, your health, your age. There are some things that we need to be aware of, and that's our own personality, our own self that can get in the way. We all have made financial decisions that have been horrible, right? We looked up and like, why did I do that? Why did I go on that trip? Why did I use debt to do that? Why did I pay for this? Or why didn't I set money aside earlier for this goal or objective? We have a tendency to make decisions emotionally and specifically irrationally, right? When we look back at decisions, we may be thinking, why did I do that? Well, if we're asking ourselves why we did that, it was probably an irrational decision. Okay. So we want to understand how those decisions, the emotions, our psychology, our psyche, our biases, how do those all impact our decision making? Okay. And there's been a ton of research on understanding what the biases are, how biases will impact our decisions. And as long as you, or at least if you're aware, there's the likelihood you can begin to make some changes. Okay. Now, there's also behavior issues, right? Spending, for example. You may become someone who does not spend a dime on anything, and you save and save and save and save and save. Well, that actually will have implications, because there is research that suggests those people don't actually spend the money when you need it in retirement. They just can't. It's in their psyche. So they just save and save and save and save, and they just cannot let it go. Then the other side, you have people who spend, 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 and they just can't set aside money for even a remote immediate an immediate goal. They're just so fulfilled with immediate gratification that they can't set money aside. So we just need to make sure we understand these aspects. And there's a ton of research, there's a ton of books on these aspects of the implications of our behaviors, and our psyches and our biases, and how that impacts our financial plan. Okay. So, how can we begin to assess some of our spending? Well, the first is obviously tracking your spending. Now, keep in mind though that tracking your spending is a reactive measure. So, when we track our spending, this is a reactive situation. In other words, it's already been done. Like you're just reviewing, you're reacting to what you have already done. Okay. And what we can do though is try to create a budget to move forward. So budgeting and actually putting money into categories that will be spent in the future, but maintaining that. This is proactive behavior. Okay. We are proactively spending the money or setting the money aside to be spent in a very specific way. All right. Assessing spending behavior. We need to assess our housing choices, our transportation choices, when we use our credit card. And then ultimately, again, this is all through this idea of budgeting and understanding where money should go versus where money is going. Because remember, if we've already spent it, the money's already been removed from our checking account. Okay, again, very high level. Most everything that we're going to be talking about in this class is going to be high level. I do not expect you all to walk away as a financial planner. Now, my hope is that you walk away excited about financial planning. Okay. So why do we want to use a financial planner? Well, one of the biggest aspects that I would suggest is accountability. Okay. We can say we want to save money. We can say that we want to set money aside to invest. And then as soon as the next shiny thing pops up, we have a desire to want to go and pursue that. Okay. So understand that a lot of it is really to help us overcome our own obstacles. Now, when you're wanting to choose a financial planner, there are hundreds of financial designations that are listed out in the world that people may have that would hold themselves to being a professional, right? Um, there are certain designations though that I think the industry would say are more prestigious or that have more clout, and those are going to be the certified financial planner. The chartered financial consultant is the CFP plus, and I think they have 3 courses. And when I say CFP here, I'm really referring to the CFP courses, not necessarily having the CFP. You don't have to have the CFP for the CHFC. And then the registered financial consultant. Someone here is probably going to be more along the lines of focusing on budgeting because they're trying to think through the idea of like how do you help people get started. Okay. And of course, you also want to talk to people about their experience, their traditional type of client, who they normally work with, etc. How do those individuals get compensated? Well, there's really a plethora of ways that they can do that. One is they can get paid on a very product that they sell you. Okay, that's this idea of commission only. Think of a car salesman. They don't get paid unless they sell a car, right? So they're going to sell you a car and then they're going to get paid. Keep in mind that there is inherent flaws in this model. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that there may be an incentive for them to sell you something that may or may not be in the best interest, your best interest, because they have a there's motivation in themselves so that they get paid. Then there's the fee plus commission, meaning I have products that I can charge you a fee on, and then I also have the ability to sell you a product with a commission. Again, that's fine. Fee only. I'm only going to be generating a fee, and I do not receive any commissions. And the biggest point of this is that an advisor can say, I'm a little bit more in line with your goals and objectives, that I don't have any difference whether you buy product A or product B. I'm not getting paid for that. Whereas in the commission only, someone may claim that product A may pay me as the advisor a little bit more money. And so I would tend to want to lead you as the client to product A when that may or may not be in your best interest. It may. But as we all know, even if it does, there's the perception that it may not because it pays the higher commission to me. So we have to be careful with that. Okay. There's also different types of roles that a person that's in the financial services industry could take on. The first is an investment advisor. Now, an investment advisor is typically from a licensing. They have a Series 66, and that refers to them as an IAR. Investment advisor representative. Sorry, took me a minute. I just kind of lost my train of thought. So an investment advisor representative who has a Series 66 is kind of classified under the Investment Advisors Act, and they can act as an investment advisor, and they have a fiduciary obligation. Fiduciary just means best interest. I am going to do what's in the best interest of my client. My client will always come before my own interests. Okay. Then there's a broker dealer. Now they are doing what is where they are buying and selling. Think of the real estate industry. Those real estate agents are basically kind of acting as a broker dealer, where I'm going to broker a transaction. I don't actually have to own the asset, but I'm going to help you meet up with um, the individual that does. That would be a broker. And I'm going to put a slash here because it's kind of really a broker and a dealer. A dealer is someone who's going to sell you something or buy something for you for their own account. So this is their own account. Okay. So, and they have to sell products that are, and they can be commission based, but they have to be suitable. Now, there's a difference between what's in your best interest and what is suitable. And again, we're not going to get into the great detail here, but just know that there is a difference between these two standards. There is a new regulation that's been out the last couple of years called Regulation BI. And again, these are from FINRA, the industry, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, I think. And this is beginning to change a little bit about we need to make sure that we are doing what's in the best interest of the client from this standpoint here. Okay. Okay. Jobs. Financial planning industry is continuing to be one of the top growth positions or careers, at least for the last few years. As you can see here, it's a roughly about 7% growth annually. Okay, so there is a need in our culture for competent financial planners. Okay, so that's where potentially you might find yourself. This slide just provides a little bit of kind of our ending slide. Really, just provides this call to action that says we need financial planners. There's kind of like this. Unfortunately, there's like a little bell curve here. So we've got actually, it's more like this. We have a bunch of say 22 to 30 year old advisors. And then we have another bunch here kind of in that 55 to 65. And we have a huge gap of planners. We don't really have a ton kind of in that range. Now it's every year, of course, it's moving a little bit. But we need to make sure that that gap gets filled because as more and more people, specifically our baby boomers, are starting to fully retire, there's going to be a significant transition of wealth from the baby boomer generation down to Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, and they're going to need help with managing that large influx of assets. Okay, so remember, it's not the assets. We want to make sure we're focused on cash flows. Okay, well, with that, we are ending our presentation. Remember, you have access to these slides. Feel free to watch this presentation again. You do have a couple of assessments that will be based off of some of the content in the slides. We do also have our kind of our embedded course text or chapters or modules. So make sure you're reading all of the information. All right, with that, hope you all have a good evening or a day.